Regulation is one area where there's been it's an evolving space, much like many of the other things, and I think as technology companies such as your company Alphabet has evolved, I think there have been uh, lots of issues with many governments around the world in it, because I just think that they have a certain regulatory regime, and I think the regime needs to evolve with the times, and this results in a lot of back and forth. How do you see the evolving regulatory regime? And it must be reasonably difficult, let's say, for a company like Alphabet, because you have multiple regulatory regimes around the world, and there is no one standard that or is there a standard? I know the EU has a standard, which is a fairly decent standard, but how does it work for you?
Look, it's an important moment. I think as tech has scaled up and tech is touching people's lives in a deeper way, it's natural that there needs to be rules of the road, and so I think it's a natural part of the process. And I think it makes sense to me that countries, think about the concerns of its own citizens and wants regulations to make sure it works well for their people. And so I think all of that makes sense to me. Through it all, it's important to understand we have this amazingly wonderful thing, which is a free and open internet, which helps connect the world in a global way and creates all the opportunities we see. And I think that's the balance with which we need to engage and work through. I think where we can find regulations which helps support the open exchange of ideas, the way the internet works today, is obviously ideal. But it makes sense that countries have, democratic countries have, are thinking through what makes sense for their country, with citizens empowered to do that. And so, you both are important, and I think the balance is important. You're right. As a large company, we deal with many countries around the world. I view it as an important role for Google to be local and engage in every country with the best interest of the country too. And so I think that's an important principle with which I approach this. But as part of that, where we can encourage commonality, we strive to do that. So if you take privacy, for example, in GDPR, there's a lot of strong foundations, and hopefully, that can be a good starting point for many countries around the world. And so we advocate for that, and as an example. But we are deeply committed to engaging in every country locally, complying with local laws, and so it's a part of the process we need to engage through, and I'm committed to doing that well.
I'm just going to take a step back and look at it in a slightly broader way. Traditionally, data and information, and the use and the control, for want of a better word, of data and information has been the purview of the state, traditionally, even in democracies. And increasingly, you have a lot of large technology companies which deal in lots of data and deal in lots of information, and who have the ability to be the sort of gatekeepers to this thing. So the relationship between these two is, to my mind, bound to be antagonistic. So how do you find a sort of a middle path in this?
I think, look, at the end of the day, you know, people will demand certain experiences. Companies will, many companies in a country also want to participate in the global export economy, right? You're not only operating within the context of your country. So there are natural forces which will pull in an interoperable way. You're right, and governments want sovereignty over things that affect the lives of their citizens, and so I think the conversation. I mean, it's tough to answer it in abstract. I think these things will evolve depending on what the underlying use cases are, how important it is, and over time. So to give an example, through COVID, the fact that data from Israel around vaccine efficacy getting shared with rest of the world all that is helpful, right? And so you have to, but at the same time, health data is exceptionally important. The privacy of it is sacrosanct, but you have to figure out ways and frameworks for all of this to work together, right? And but you can solve it in the context of that specific issue. So I think over time regulations need to take into account the industries, the purpose of what they're trying to solve, and there's no one answer. You're rightfully calling out that there will be tensions through a process like this, but that makes sense, that's natural. But I think over time we have to work to find common answers.
You've repeatedly used the term open internet, and there are times when the need for this balance, as you said, and I remember that over the summer when India released its own rules, guidelines for internet companies, you again emphasized that the free and open internet is foundational to your company, and that you have to strike a balance between that and the evolving regulatory regime. But there are times when um, these two seem to be at odds, right? I mean, and at which point, what do you do, or do you go case by case?
Look, I mean, we approach it. We're going to approach it constructively, and as I said, we want to approach it with the view of making sure the work we are doing is helpful to the people in the context of the country in which we operate, and that's a principle with which we will approach these things. And I think just even in India, there are Indian companies. I talked about the unicorns emerging over time. I expect many of them to be able to scale up and tap into markets and grow, on the internet, and that's what some of the benefits of the open internet provides. And so I think it's important to think about it holistically, and and that's part of how a country has to think about its regulations.